This is Jessie, and you're listening to the Curious Cabinet Podcast. Well, hello everyone. I hope you had a good week. Today I wanted to cover this case because a couple of my followers had asked me to, and it is an interesting case. It does seem to me that some of the search within this case was not executed efficiently. And there really is a lot that's unknown. I don't have a lot of information on it because there really isn't that much that's available to the public. I don't know if there is that much in general. But there's some strangeness to it. So let's get to it. And I might pronounce her name wrong. I apologize if I do. But I am going to call her Alyssa Romine-Olson. Now, Alyssa Romine-Olson was born Alyssa Romine on November 27th, 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona. She was born to Barbara and Ed Romine, and I'm not exactly sure how many, but I do know that she has brothers and sisters. She grew up in Phoenix and attended Gilbert High School. She was deeply religious, loved music, and loved to sing. And she was also known as a very kind and gentle person. She was married to Braden Taft Olson, but they had just separated and she moved back into her parents' home. Not exactly sure the reasoning. I couldn't really find too much about their relationship. Alyssa was very friendly and, as I said before, deeply religious. She went to Riparian Nature Preserve every morning. She had a routine every day. She got up very early before her parents woke up and would go to the preserve because it would get really hot out. Remember, it's Phoenix in June, so she would always get out of the house before her parents woke up when it was nice and cool. And she would go down to the preserve and she sat on a bench and prayed or journaled or read her Bible. And she wasn't afraid to approach strangers. She would always be friendly with them and openly speak about her religion. She was last seen at home on June 8th, 2016, around 9 p.m. when she went to bed. Her parents said it was a normal evening and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But the next day, on the 9th, she left home before they woke up, as her daily routine. But as it got later in the day, her parents became increasingly worried. They decided to go to the nature preserve and search for her because she hadn't come home. When they did, they found her car abandoned in the parking lot of the preserve, which also shared a parking lot with the Maricopa Library near Guadalupe and Greenfield Roads. The car was parked and locked. Her phone wasn't inside, and there was nothing that suggested a struggle took place there, but Alyssa was nowhere to be found. When the police came, they questioned multiple people at the preserve and some in the library, but they found no witnesses. 2 days later, on June 10th, her body was found floating in one of the 7 ponds in the nature preserve. The specific pond it was in was close to the entrance of the trails, but was hidden from view of the main trail because of how much thick brush covered the area. And it was really people would walk past it, but it wasn't a place that was in view because of how much brush. It wasn't accessible. So you couldn't really see it from the main trail, and it was really hard to get back there. You would have to climb through all this brush and overgrowth and everything. That week, the temperatures started rising and the heat was getting intense. This caused the body to kind of start to decompose at an accelerated rate. The medical examiner said that the cause of death couldn't be determined. But a big factor in this case was that there was no water in her lungs. which is a big indication that it wasn't an accidental drowning or a suicide. The terrain around the pond was strange. There was no sign of a struggle, no drag marks, no pieces of clothing caught on brush around it. There was nothing that even indicated that a person was in the area of that pond. Her body was found with abrasions on her back, which were unexplained. Her feet were also caked in mud. When they tested for DNA, they took samples from under her fingernails and they did a rape kit. The rape kit came back with only Alyssa's DNA. So I'm not sure if there were any signs of rape. If there were, it wasn't disclosed to the public. But that would mean that the attack wasn't really sexually motivated and would kind of mean it was more of a crime of passion, right? Like just whoever did it was just kind of crazed. But the pond was drained as well, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the ponds were, to search for more evidence, but nothing was found at the bottom of the ponds. Suicide was mentioned a lot in the beginning. But it was eventually ruled out. The thing is that she was a little bit depressed because of the separation from her husband. So they assumed that she would have committed suicide. But if she committed suicide, wouldn't she have water in her lungs? She would have drowned. But anyway, so when the toxicology reports came back, they came back inconclusive due to the body being in the water and the temperature affecting the body and everything. All of Alyssa's rings and necklaces were still on her body, which also kind of rules out robbery as a motive because they would have been stolen. And like I said, she was found nude, but I don't think they ever found her clothes. I can't find any reports saying that they did or didn't. And also her journal, which she would have had on her, was never found. But the case seemed to have gone cold in the second week of June, and the ponds were refilled and the park was reopened. The phone records place Alyssa at the preserve that morning, but not at the pond where she was found. It last pinged at the entrance of the preserve, but no one had any idea how she got to where the pond was, especially it being as secluded as it is. Early on in the case, I told you before, police considered suicide because of the recent separation from her husband. She did begin feeling anxious and depressed. But even through everything, she didn't isolate herself from her family or friends, and she stayed true to her faith. Nothing suggested that there was a crisis. So this is kind of going to trail off exactly from her case, but I do think it's worth mentioning because it may be important. Gilbert had a series of deaths that happened to be between 2016 and 2019, all of which involved lakes or ponds. So in July of 2018, now Alyssa died in 2016, but in July of 2018, 2 women were found dead in Gilbert in 2 separate lakes. One I couldn't find any information about, but it was ruled a suicide. The other woman, named Toni Fierce, I apologize if I mispronounce that, was found dead at Cosmo Dog Park near Ray Road and Loop 202. They called it an accidental drowning and said that there were no signs of foul play. I couldn't find the results of the toxicology report, but I suspect it was some sort of natural accident. I couldn't really find too much about this case either. On February 17th, 2019, someone biking through Gilbert Park found the body of a man floating in a lake near Queen Creek and Lindsay Roads. I've tried to find more information on this man, but all I could find was that he was an adult African-American male. There's no public information on identification or the cause of death. Gilbert police did state that the death wasn't suspicious. They've also made it clear that these deaths are not connected, but I don't know. All of it sounds kind of weird. I think it's important to mention this because it is a small town, and this kind of thing doesn't normally happen there. So for it to happen so much in such a short period of time, it kind of puts people on high alert. Always traveling in pairs, especially at the preserve or at parks. Like, you got to be careful. So at the funeral, Ed and Barbara claimed that Braden, the husband, forbade them or anyone else from Alyssa's family to speak. They also claimed that some of the Sun Valley Community Church were people, like members from the church, were allowed to speak at the funeral. And they claimed that Alyssa was better off dead than with her family. And these were all people that didn't know her family. Like, that's a really strange claim to make. Alyssa's sister Chelsea claimed that 4 months after Alyssa's death, an unidentified Asian man followed the family home after they had visited Riparian Nature Preserve. She thought that the killer may have been a member of the Sun Valley Community Church or was somehow associated with the church. Now, another suspect was just a transient who hung out at the library and biked at the preserve. When police searched him, he had a bag on him that contained a woman's hair tie, latex gloves, and religious writings. And to me, that really doesn't mean anything unless it was her actual hair tie, but I don't see, like, they didn't say that, and I don't know, that just seems like a little far-fetched. I mean, if he was someone like a transient, he was just bouncing from place to place, maybe he has long hair and he had a hair tie. Like, they don't make men's hair ties. I don't think they do. I don't know. But anyway, like, people like that just kind of have random stuff on them, so that really doesn't mean too much to me. Why would he need latex gloves if he was going to kill someone and throw them in a pond? Everything would have been washed away. You know what I mean? But anyway, Barbara also claimed in 2017, in the months following Alyssa's death, that a man had been harassing the family. The unidentified person claimed that they found drag marks near the pond and knew that Braden killed Alyssa. Like, specifically said that. I don't think the man was ever contacted by police, and I assume that it just stopped there, but once again, information is sparse on this case, so I'm not too sure. That same year, the family requested the files for the case because they really saw nothing happening. Everything seemed strange, and they were just kind of left in the dark about the whole thing. So when they went through the files, it seemed as if some were almost redacted. There were only fragments of information and partial dispatch logs recorded. So when Barbara began matching up the timeline of information, the timestamps had been altered, even by a few seconds, which is weird. Officers' notes were incomplete, and it seemed like details were kind of passed over in the writing, all things that should have been recorded and weren't. Entire segments seemed to be condensed into generic sentences. So when she looked at the search logs, the family found that it was recorded that the southeast pond was searched and cleared on the afternoon of June 9th, which means either she wasn't there and somebody put her there after, or she was and they just didn't search it. Maybe they didn't feel like it climbing through that terrain. But then another record said that the area's first formal inspection wasn't until June 10th, which also you would have found her because that was the day she was found. Then a third record didn't mention the southeast pond at all. June 10th record said that they rechecked the water complex, suggesting they checked it again, but she was there. Like, that's where she was. So was there multiple times that it was so-called checked, but it wasn't? Obviously, they would have found her unless she was put there after. Like, there's a lot of inconsistencies there. So all those records being incorrect because her body was in the pond and no one found her. I mean, everything contradicted itself. It also stated that an officer was stationed by Southeast Trail until 9 p.m. that night, like on the 9th. But an hour earlier, that same officer was supposed to be investigating around the library. in the audio, there seemed to be interference while searching the area where Alyssa was found, but it was never documented. A volunteer said that there was a strange interference with their compass while they were searching in that area, but they blamed it on the heat and some magnetic debris in the soil. So maybe that magnetic interference was the reason, like, the audio cut out while they were searching. I don't know. That's just my thought process, but who knows? But there were also footprints photographed behind the library. Like, this is really important. And it's, like, not addressed. But some of the footprints looked like bare feet, and some were shoe impressions leading towards the trail, but not away from it. So that's weird. I mean, Alyssa was found nude. She didn't have her shoes on. That could have been her footprints. It just seems like there should have been something else addressed with this. But Alyssa's parents were interviewed by the Gilbert Sun News in September of 2023. They said that she wasn't on drugs or alcohol. She was deeply religious. She wouldn't do that. And that suicide would never have been an option. Her religion forbade it. And generally, she was fine with life. She was just getting through a divorce. I mean, I've never been through a divorce, so I don't know exactly how that is. I mean, I've been through breakups and serious relationships, but I'm sure, like, especially with someone religious like that, where the religion doesn't really want you to get divorced, I mean, she was probably struggling a bit, but it doesn't really mean that she wants to kill herself. She's just struggling. I mean, so you can't just say she's suicidal because she's a little bit upset about her relationship. But at that time, they also said that the Gilbert Police Department hadn't contacted them since 2018. I haven't seen any updates to that recently. I haven't seen any public information that's come out. Nothing. Alyssa's family still fights for justice. If you have any tips regarding this case, even the most minuscule, contact the Gilbert Police Department at 480-503-6500 or contact Silent Witness anonymously at 480-948-6377. And that's all for today, guys. Just a short episode, but I thought this case was worth talking about. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this podcast, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Until next week.